Hello and welcome to my advanced tutorial of Synfig. Here, I'll be going over more detailed aspects in using layers and parameters with a few miscellaneous things. If you haven't been through the beginner's tutorial or have at least some understanding in operating Synfig, then these two links will lead you to my beginner's tutorial and Synfig's tutorial wiki. As with the beginner tutorial, this video may be updated depending on multiple factors, such as Synfig's version progression, effectiveness of the videos themselves, or an angry digital mob that wants me to update them. In no way, however, are these videos meant to circumvent Synfig.com's own tutorials, as I believe that the more tutorials with different perspectives available, the better others will be able to learn Synfig. Now, we'll be going a bit fast, starting with the spline creation window to the parameters and finally layers window, all in one go. First and foremost, select the Spline tool and look at the spline creation window. These settings will stay as is until you've altered it, but as of right now, the only thing that needs to be altered is the brush size to below 0.1. Layer type determines what is created on the canvas and listed in the layers window. Blend method determines how it is rendered in the canvas, but can be changed in the parameters window. Opacity is how transparent your spline will be, but is best left alone, as it too can be changed in the parameter window. Brush size is what affects the size of the outline spline and can be altered in the parameters window, but it will use the settings set in the spline creation window as the basis for scaling the outline spline size. Feather is an effect where the spline is given a faded effect on its edges, where the higher the number, the more of the spline is faded. Again, it can be altered in the parameters window, and scaling is still based off of the settings in the creation window, so leaving it at 0 is best for now. Link origins and auto export should be left alone, as I haven't messed around with them and don't really know their effects. Link origins should be checked and auto export unchecked. Now, with your settings set, create a basic shape, and if necessary, readjust the spline creation settings to your liking. Within the parameters window should be a list of options to adjust your spline that is currently selected. To find which spline is currently selected, look at the layers window and find the layer highlighted in blue. Ignoring Z-depth, as it has similar functions to the layer window, color, origin, and vertices should be easy to understand. Color, of course, allows you to change the color of the selected spline. Origin allows the change in position of the selected spline, and vertices allows the modification of the vertices of the selected spline. Amount changes how much color is applied to the canvas. 1 being the standard application without any effect applied, while anything below 1 causes transparency. Anything above 1 causes effects such as alteration in color interaction with other splines or increase in intensity, but is useful in conjunction with the feathering effect. Blend method is the same blend setting within the spline creation window and changes how the spline appears on the canvas. The ones that would be most common are composite, places the spline onto the canvas as is without effects; onto, the spline is placed within other splines that are below it in the layers window that is grouped with; and alpha over. Use the spline shape to create a deleted effect on other splines that are beneath it in the layers window and represents it in the canvas, but doesn't remove or delete the splines that are in the layers window. These blend methods are used to create illusions within the canvas to achieve certain effects. The feather option is another effect, where, as explained before, creates a fade effect on the edges of the spline. If you increase the number in amount, then you can go higher in number with feather without losing the spline shape. Those effects, used correctly, along with other layers, such as gradients, among other layers, can create amazing effects that can be seen in the demo files that can be found in the installed directory. Layers such as the before-mentioned gradients can be found by right-clicking a layer in the layer window, then selecting New Layer on the top, where it will give you an array of options. The demo files do show what some of those layers can do, but it's better to use more common ones that will be useful, such as the gradients, other, stylize, and transform. Gradients, such as the noise and linear, are the more common, and usually the gradients you'll use for effects, such as shading, or for something more advanced as making realistic flames. Within Other, you'll find text and time loop, in which text is pretty self-explanatory and uses fonts that are installed on your machine, while time loop assists in looping frames to create the illusion of a continuous animation. As for stylize, beveling is a lighting effect on the edges of the spline, which could be done yourself through splines, but would cost more memory, unless you want to have control over where the shading or lighting should be. Transform gives you all the tools to keep what you've created intact during animation or while trying to relocate them in a different position. Translate keeps your spline shape the same and allows it to traverse on the X and Y axis. The rotate allows rotation without changing in size, and finally the scale allows resizing of the spline. Those transform layers are best used in a group so as to define what splines are to be affected, but is useful with some restrictions for animation. As for grouping layers, they are usually used as a means to organize the layers, so as to find them more easily, or to define the use of certain layers so only a set of splines are affected and not the entire canvas. First, select one of the layers in the Layers window, and then left shift-click the other spline. This will select both splines, and when you right-click on either one of them, the Group Layer option will become available. As an example of using everything that has been mentioned previously, I am going to group these two layers, and then apply a noise gradient above them. Then, I am going to change the noise gradient's blend method to onto, so it applies itself to only those splines in the group layer. This is the most common way to manipulate gradients and splines to create effects, and to show why group layers are important. I'm going to create another basic shape, then I'm going to use the arrows on the bottom left of the Layers window to change its depth to below that of the group layer. The noise gradient doesn't apply itself to these splines, but if I was to select it, then left click and hold it to pick it up, then move it outside of the group layer and below the group layer, it will apply itself to the entirety of the canvas. The group layer is of course above everything, and thus anything within the group layer is unaffected. But because the noise gradient is without a group, it will always apply itself onto the canvas. Of course, the second shape would be seen if the noise gradient was below it in the layer window, and both shapes would be below the noise gradient if it was above it in the layer window. Therefore, groups aren't entirely necessary for everything. As another example, as for what I use for backgrounds, now you have everything you need in manipulating and using Synfig. In terms of animation, however, experience is the only thing that can truly teach you, and I have only a few tips to give. As Synfig is similar yet unique to other animation software, you should know that it automatically calculates the spline's location between two keyframes. When animating, try to keep the length between frames short when you're altering your spline shape without the transform layers. Transform layers can be used to help with the animation, but you end up having to segment parts of an image just to use the transform layers. These methods are meant to mitigate Synfig's animation errors. Those errors could range from splines resizing incorrectly on their own, or relocating an entirely different location between keyframes. These few tips, along with experience in Synfig's animation, will allow you to work around those problems and use Synfig however you wish. With these few things, you should be fully capable to create images and animate without too many complications in operating Synfig. Of course, don't be afraid to ask questions or throw out ideas to see what others' perspectives may bring. However, this brings the tutorials for Synfig to an end, as experience is all that's left for you to gain. As for me, I can actually go back to whipping Synfig back to work. Yes, and finishing my projects. Bye.